Hey, this is Dave from MetalEpidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. Gentlemen, it is that time again. It is album review time. And for this review, Duncan, Kyle and I have been checking out the new album from technical metal group Utopia. The band's new album Stalker will be released on August 27th via APF Records. So, this is the debut album from Utopia. A band created by guitarist John Bailey and corrupt moral altar vocalist Chris Reese. Now, John Bailey is, wait for it, the guitarist for, I'm just going to watch your minds blown right now, two people, Russell Watson and Aled Jones. Yep, you heard that correctly. He is the touring guitarist for Russell Watson and Aled Jones.
That's not where I thought you were going. I thought you were going to be like, I'm going to blow your mind here. John Bailey is my dad. I know it's difficult to believe, and he doesn't know it yet, but he's my dad. So.
John, if you're out there, call me.
Hi Dad, you missed 39 birthdays, you fuck.
Yeah, when I read that, I was like, wait, what? Russell Watson and Aled Jones?
What?
The snowman guy.
Yes, we're walking in the air.
And Russell Watson, the operatic kind of classical singer.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense listening to Utopia.
Yeah.
The album also sees John and Chris joined by a fairly impressive list of guest musicians, such as 4 drummers, Billy Reimer of Dillinger Escape Plan, and he also played for Glassjaw for a wee while, Bard Kolstad from Leprous, Lee Fisher from Fond Limbs and Psyopus, and Cy Blakelock from Tangaroa and Dream Troll. Also, they have guitarist Simon Peter King, bassist Aaron McSporran from De Profundis and Vervum, and finally keyboardist Mike Moran from Ozzy Osbourne and George Harrison. So, quite an impressive list of guests on this one, but the initial kind of idea for the band was formed by John Bailey, who wanted to kind of bring together all the music he loves, creating something aggressive and intense, but also kind of well thought out and kind of intelligent. He said, I wanted it to be super heavy and crazy, but also really emotional. The music combines elements of jazz and various styles of metal. The songwriting is very important lyrically and structurally. The lyrics draw influence from philosophy, literature, art, and film, particularly the films of Andrei Tarkovsky.
Oh, yes, Tarkovsky.
The album was mixed and mastered by...
Long and in black and white. That's the way I like them.
Mixed and mastered by Rob Hobson at Silent City Records. So, this is like another one of those albums where the musicians contributing to the album are located all over the world. So that always kind of interests me. I'm always kind of keen to hear how that comes across on like the final product, considering like a lot of this would have been recorded separately and not as a full band. And also, it's not a style that I imagine would be like plain sailing just to kind of nail down. You know what I mean? This is pretty twisted and complex. Like pulling influences from bands like Dillinger, Meshuggah, Botch, Dysrhythmia. It's not a 4 on the floor type album, if you know what I'm saying. And I think, like for me, these albums can often go kind of one of two ways. They either go really deep on the kind of techie, kind of mathy stuff, and it becomes an album that's really impressive, like technically on the surface, but maybe not with a huge amount of substance. or kind of taking a band like Dillinger as an example. They deliver, all that kind of intricacy and technical kind of goodness, but it's balanced out with like melody or some form of hook, something you can kind of hold on to after the album is finished. But it's also got that kind of bit of depth to it as well. And for me, after listening to this album a good few times, I think this album, for the most part, kind of leans more into the latter. Initially, I kind of thought, like, when I first started listening to this, I thought, this is going to be like one of those albums that's just full of the most complex structures and rhythms and time signatures that's just going to leave your head in bits, like, by the end of it. Because it does start off with that kind of very, like, Dillinger-esque kind of... And, like, when I say Dillinger, I mean, like, kind of old Dillinger, like, Calculating Infinity kind of Dillinger with loads of blasts and, disjointed riffs and rhythms. With maybe some kind of more kind of jazzy undertones, especially in the bass playing at times, but and I don't mind that. I absolutely don't. It definitely has its place for sure, but that can be quite exhausting, to listen to for a full album. But what did surprise me on that first track was the kind of ebb and flow that it took. It doesn't like remain at that full intensity for the entire track. They transition into some kind of nice, kind of cleaner, more progressive moments, and then they finish you off with something a bit more kind of riff-based that's like quite dissonant and quite meaty. And I really enjoyed that kind of journey of like sounds and ideas. It wasn't just like a wall of sound and rhythms and complexities for like 3 minutes. They kind of dipped in and out of that heaviness, which I think, for me anyway, it kept me kind of intrigued to like where is this album going to go next. And to be honest, they use that kind of technique on a lot of the tracks, blending that like extremely technical kind of mathcore element with like clean progressive or jazz sections, kind of like a Dillinger meets like a bit of Candiria, but a little bit of Sikth as well at times.
Definitely.
That Sikth vibe kind of popped up quite a few times in this. There's a track on the album called What About Me, and you can hear it in the kind of the guitar lead work, but also vocally. Chris Reese, obviously from Corrupt Moral Altar, and he has got like one of the most kind of varied array of tones and textures. Like he can do the real like guttural stuff during the heavier parts, but he's got a really cool kind of mid-range as well. But then he can switch into that kind of... It kind of reminds me of that kind of eccentric kind of Mikey Goodman type vocal as well. So I really enjoyed what he was bringing to the table. I think he fits this style really well. But at times, this band also bring a kind of imposing, almost kind of doomy post-metal thickness to their sound as well. I think the title track was when it really kind of hit me. Just these huge chords that are like layered with atmospheric lead work. It sounds massive, and it appears again on a track called Happiness and again on Moscow Holiday. I love that side of their sound. It's something that you don't get an awful lot of from kind of standard kind of mathcore type stuff. And although these guys don't have that kind of Dillinger or Sikth kind of clean vocal hook, I felt like this was a really good replacement for that kind of melody that didn't have vocally. Like musically, there's no denying like how impressive this is. The guitar work from John Bailey is sickeningly good. Some of those riffs are unbelievable. The solos as well, incredible. There was a solo on Impotent Prophet, I think the track was called, that just shouldn't work. Like the riffs in the background of that track are really dark and kind of dissonant, but the solo over the top was really like uplifting. It just, like, the two kind of tones of it just sounded like on paper just shouldn't work, but it did. It totally worked on that track. And that, I was listening, I was just thinking, this is kind of mind blowing to think that this guy is touring with Alan Jones and Russell Watson. Like, I couldn't get my head around it. But and the level of talent right across the board on this is insane. Like, you can tell these guys they're not cutting their teeth here. This is although it's a debut album, these guys are very seasoned. Even down to like the four drummers involved, all very talented guys. I think the only kind of small issue that I had with with this is not every track kind of felt like a complete home run. I felt there were a couple of moments that I just didn't kind of click with. I was kind of waiting on a moment where everything came together on a couple of tracks, and it maybe just didn't happen. And I was a little bit torn on the first track, actually. I liked the first track. I liked it when I first heard it, but then after I heard the album about 4 or 5 times, I didn't think it was the strongest track they could have opened the album with. So I was a little bit like, after I was thinking, I'm still undecided about it, actually. I'm not sure if that was the strongest way they could have opened the album. But again, this is just me. What about you guys? What did you guys make of this? Duncan, what did you think?
There's a lot to enjoy in this album, for sure. I think, I'm glad that you mentioned Sikth, because that was, out with Dillinger, that was a kind of predominant influence. And when we say Sikth, we're leaning more towards, early Sikth. And that's also aided in the production on this one. The production is very easy to overproduce something like this and give everything this like veneer of like clarity, which it doesn't have. The drum production and the bass production in particular have a really natural vibe, which when you're experimenting with the kind of the jazzier side of metal, it kind of has to have that. Otherwise it doesn't work. So I found myself gravitating towards like being able to seamlessly pick out what everyone was doing without necessarily thinking there'd been too much fuckery there. I think vocally it's a really interesting album. I'm glad that once again you mentioned dexterity and diversity. He's using his voice as sounds like a strange thing to say, but he's using his voice as an instrument. As opposed to using his voice like to front a band. And that works for me in the context of this music. Once again, linking back to Sikth and to Dillinger, both their vocalists do the same thing. It's all about adding a level of texture or an element or tone over a piece of music, which almost gives it its own personality. It almost makes it, there's a lot of this that feels like kind of high concept avant-garde art. And once again, doesn't surprise me you mentioned Tarkovsky, because that's kind of his cinema. His cinema is seen as being, it's very avant-garde, very artistic, very thought-provoking and philosophical. So all those things marry really, really well together. Even the kind of album artwork itself has this kind of, not cubist art form, but it has very much this idea of you imagine like a painting from like 1925 or something by this like forgotten master and that's just kind of what I got from this. Is it just really feels like that there's a lot of time that's went into this. The synths are really interesting because they go from playing kind of loops in a weird, almost this sounds like an 80s computer, all the way through to actually adding levels of subtlety underneath what the band are playing, and that works really, really well. We've spoken about this before. A pet peeve of mine is overuse of synth, or someone that is just pressing anything because there's a gap that you can do it in. That's not the case here. The spaces that are picked out for them are great. It's really interesting that because you filled it, because I never read anything. So you fill in a lot of these blanks for me. What was interesting for me is it did feel like different drummers. I would never have guessed that there was 4 on the album, but it did feel like on certain tracks that the drummer was either coming at from a completely different angle, or this just felt like someone else was playing on the... I put it down to, I just assumed this had taken ages to record and they'd been in the studio, and as a result that kind of feel that you would get in an album recording session just wasn't there. But that makes a lot more sense to me. You can't deny the musicianship, it's impeccable. You can't deny the songwriting, it's impeccable. I do think it loses its way a couple of times on the album. I love What About Me. I think it's a fucking great song. Also reminds me of obscure reference of the recording right now. Back in the old days of WCW, when I was a lad and I was doing the old Monday Night Wars, there was a character called Raven, and that was his catchphrase. What about me? What about Raven? And it made me think of that, even though the song sounds nothing like that. But I imagined Raven Front in the band, which made me giggle. But like that song stood out to me. Impotent Prophet, you're right. I think there's almost like especially when the solo kicks in, there's almost like it's warring with itself. Like it shouldn't go, but it does go. But then a projection of Me and You, the track that follows on, like has this bit like towards the end where you've had all this stuff going on and it just hits you with a fucking stonking riff. It just knows that's what you need at that point, which I love. I think maybe my favourite song on the album is Smile, Yawn, Nodded, which is track 9, which has a lot of weirdness on it and a lot of kind of dexterity, and it's followed by the absolutely nonsense obscure Moscow Holiday, which is just it's so different than what's on the rest of the album. My only gripe with this is that I think it maybe goes too out there at times.
Right.
I think if I was listening to the songs individually and not in an album, it's not an issue. So taking the songs individually, one a bit at a time, I think they're all excellent. I think in the context of the album, I don't maybe have as much reservations about the Bus Station Roof opening track as you do as an opener. I think they would struggle with any of the songs there to put them as a first song on there to give a real indication of what you're going to get on the album, which is basically what an opening track is supposed to do. It's a statement of intent of this is what you're going to get on this album. Yeah. I think that's almost, for a band that sounds like this, it's almost a fool's errand to try and do that. So it's as good as any song you could have put there, to be fair. I just think at times songs don't naturally link into the next song. It feels like there's almost and it happens a few times, and I'm usually okay with a break in an album where I'm like, right, this is going into the more experimental phase. Yeah. But because all the songs are like that, I think it has an issue there. But not enough to like chop points and points off of it. This is a musician's band. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you're interested in music, if you're interested in composition, if you're interested in production, or just in general what high level talent sounds like collaborating on something, you will do a lot worse than listen to the new Utopia album. It really has everything kind of locked in on that. I don't know how much of an overall cohesive listen to your average punter it necessarily gives.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you actually in terms of the track, going from track to track. It's weird though because the actual tracks themselves have great transitions.
Oh god, yeah.
Between that kind of really techie stuff into the more ambient side or the cleaner side, those kind of transitions from one to the other work amazingly well. But I know what you mean. There were a few moments in the album where I was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure.
How you get over this is live in a live setting.
True.
You do this audio visual.
Yeah.
So you have videos that play that tie into the songs, and that's how you get over those transitions.
Yeah.
But in the format that we've got it in that medium, it does feel a bit disjointed jumping between tracks. But once you get into the track, it's fucking fine. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Kyle, what did you think?
He must have loved this.
If I saw them play live, I'd buy them all dinner. This must be impossible.
This is one of these ones that when I was listening to it, I instantly thought, is this Dave trying to make it up to Kyle for all the shit he's put him through this year?
Yeah, it feels like it, because this was... I mean, I've got a lot of same thoughts as you two guys. It's like there's a lot to love on this. The musicianship is fucking incredible. Unbelievable playing on every level from every member of the band. I like how the vocalist goes from like deep down death metal to fucking Danny Filth in 1997 or whatever year that album came out. He's going super high. Yeah. And I'm just like, and it still sounds awesome. And I'm like, the production is amazing. It's natural, organic sounding is how metal should sound. It's not super squeaky clean like you mentioned earlier. It's not but it's not crap either. You can make out every instrument, and they all. I mean, it's called a mix for a reason. They're all together cohesively, and they're not like too separated. But it doesn't sound like shit either. But yeah, I mean, there's loads of stuff on there. There's like chunky fucking awesome riffs. There's all the crazy discordant stuff that I like as well. There's the jazz, which has those incredible bass licks in there, which are fantastic. Yep. Not a fan of that bass tone during the jazz things, but that's just personal preference. Just don't like it at all. It's like a honky sort of. I just never been a fan of it. But that's the only gripe I have with the bass. It's because it's just a personal thing. Yeah, but the thing is, I felt like maybe they did go out there, like Duncan's go out there a bit too often and a bit too much and a bit like there was a lack of cohesion here and there with stuff, and I was just wondering, is that it's obviously intentional and stuff, but did they want to take it that far? Was it, it just felt like maybe they went a bit too far too soon, like, especially on the first track, like the first minute, and you've got super crazy heavy distortion and all that stuff, and then you've got this weird jazzy bassy thing, and it's like, reminds me a little bit of that first Slipknot EP, a little bit, because they did the exact same thing. Well, not exactly, they did this super heavy thing and then it went into like slap bass jazz licks, and it was just like, all right, there was a weird mix, and it's a weird mix here, but it works better here than Slipknot did it, definitely. Yeah. But still, I thought like sometimes they did it a bit too often, and it felt a bit like, okay, have we got another trick? And they do, of course. But every now and then I'll just be like, okay, fair enough. And another thing was, what I was going to say now. Obviously not that important. Oh yeah, well, some of the riffs and some of the like parts and stuff were really, really good, but they lasted like a fraction of a second, and I was like, you could go back to that, and it would probably make the song better. I felt like a lot of the time there wasn't enough to latch onto to like in the songs, if you know what I mean. It's like a part would be there and gone, and then we're doing something else now, and I'm like, that's all well and good, but like you said, it's a musician's album. It's an album for people who appreciate this kind of stuff, and for crazy people that have 4 seconds attention span. I think standout tracks for me are definitely A Projection of Me on You and Moscow Holiday. They're definitely my two favorites on this. They're great. I really, really enjoyed this. That riff at the end of A Projection was great. And that's one of those times when they actually just stuck to it and did what they do really well and kept it going, and it felt really great, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I can't knock points off it because it's just fantastic. I love how they are playing their instruments into such a high level. I'm like, I'm going to sell all my shit and just fucking give up, That's it, I'm done.
You've got to watch how loud you say that, just in case your wife hears it and goes, finally. Finally.
Yeah. Oh, he's going to give up. Last night, I heard you say in your room, you're going to give this shit up. And when's that going to happen? Can I have it in writing? Can you sign it? And we'll take it down to the notary's office.
Recorded.
You're like, listen, what you heard me saying was I was giving up drugs.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Not anything else. I don't know, because I think we're all kind of... I wonder if, and once again I'm speculating, the nature of this being recorded disparate with so many different musicians, I wonder if that impacts the cohesion on the album.
I think
like you're writing songs as opposed to writing an album.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why, or once again, like I say, it could just very much be that each song is its own little country. And if that's the case, then that's fine as well.
It could go one or two ways. It could be like the main guy, they said it was a band that the guitarist brought together. He could have written all of the songs and had everybody play their part and rub their personality on it. Or he could have come up with some riffs or some parts and said, what could you do with this as a drummer? Yeah. And then he'd come up with some parts and do some stuff. But that would take forever. But I've done both of those things both ways, and they come out very differently. Like with the band, I tend to write all of the demos and they just rub all their stuff on it. And then, but with other projects I've had in the past, I've just said, I've got this riff, what do you want to do? And somebody comes back with something I never would have thought of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it could have gone. But, I mean, this sounds like it is definitely all of them together. Because, like you said, the drum parts are so different. And there's a lot of disparities between each song as well. So it sounds like the guitarist probably had the main idea for some stuff. And they just let everybody come in with a lot. Because, I mean, especially the jazz bass parts, because I mean, being a guitarist, you're probably not going to be super versed in jazz bass, but so I think it could have gone either way. Honestly.
Okay. So ratings for this new album from Utopia. And yeah, I enjoyed this one. And it wasn't like super long either. So even though it is like heavy technical, with, it does have that kind of the moments of kind of melody and ambience and stuff, which I really liked.
It's under not 40 minutes.
Yeah. So it doesn't become like
it's kind of length. Yeah,
absolutely. I think like I can't fault this on a technical level. I think the musicianship is stunning. And the production was really good as well. I like that kind of organic sound I went for. I think I'd probably go 4 out of 5 on this one. As I said, I had a couple of issues here and there with a few of the tracks, and I'm still unsure about the first track, if I'd picked that for the opener, but that's just me. So I'd go 4 out of 5. Duncan?
I think we're all going to probably come in around the same grade here for all the same reasons. This is a 4-star album for me. I imagine if you like your albums a bit more flowy, then this probably scores a bit below. But like, I understand and appreciate the work that's gone into this. And like, to give it anything less than a 4 is to spit in the face of the musicians that made it. So yeah, it's real. I can't stress it enough. If you have even a passing interest in composition of music or production or anything to do with music in general, then you should listen to it. Even if it's not a genre that you like, you should listen to it, because there is a lot to mine here. 4.
Nice. Kyle?
I'm going to give it a 1 out of 5, because how dare they be so fucking good? No, it's 4 out of 5, definitely.
4. Nice.
Absolutely top shelf playing and composition and songwriting. It's just, minus a couple of things that would make it a bit more catchy and a bit more memorable, but
yeah,
it's fucking incredible stuff. So
nice.
Definitely check it out.
This one drops on August 27th via APF Records. If you want to check these guys out, it's facebook.com/Utopia Band Metal. I will put a link in the description to their Facebook and their Bandcamp and stuff when this goes on YouTube. So you can check out the album when it drops. That's the review. Let us know what you think. If you've heard any of the singles, let us know what you think. And when the album drops, happy to hear your comments on it. So that's the review. Check it out. It's definitely a recommendation from me and from the other guys. So definitely give this one a little listen.